Chapter 14. The death of John the Baptist. This is also told in Mark 6:14 to 29, Luke 9:7 to 9. About this time, Herod the ruler heard the news about Jesus and told his officials, "This is John the Baptist. He has come back from death, and that's why he has the power to perform these miracles." Herod had earlier arrested John and had him chained and put in prison. He did this because John had told him, "It isn't right for you to take Herodias, the wife of your brother Philip." Herod wanted to kill John, but the people thought John was a prophet, and Herod was afraid of what they might do. When Herod's birthday came, the daughter of Herodias danced for the guests. She pleased Herod so much that he swore to give her whatever she wanted. But the girl's mother told her to say, "Here on a dish, I want the head of John the Baptist." The king was sorry for what he had said, but he did not want to break the promise he had made in front of his guests. So he ordered the guard to go to the prison and cut off John's head. It was taken on a dish to the girl, and she gave it to her mother. John's followers took his body and buried it. Then they told Jesus what had happened. Jesus feeds 500. This is also told in Mark 6:30 to 44, Luke 9:10 to 17, John 6:1 to 14. After Jesus heard about John, he crossed Lake Galilee to go to some place where he could be alone. But the crowds found out and followed him on foot from the towns. When Jesus got out of the boat, he saw the large crowd. He felt sorry for them and healed everyone who was sick. That evening, the disciples came to Jesus and said, "This place is like a desert, and it is already late. Let the crowds leave so they can go to the villages and buy some food." Jesus replied, "They don't have to leave. Why don't you give them something to eat?" But they said, "We have only 5 small loaves of bread and 2 fish." Jesus asked his disciples to bring the food to him, and he told the crowd to sit down on the grass. Jesus took the 5 loaves and the 2 fish. He looked up toward heaven and blessed the food. Then he broke the bread and handed it to his disciples, and they gave it to the people. After everyone had eaten all they wanted, Jesus' disciples picked up 12 large baskets of leftovers. There were about 5,000 men who ate, not counting the women and children. Jesus walks on the water. This is also told in Mark 6:45 to 52, John 6:15 to 21. Straight away, Jesus made his disciples get into a boat and start back across the lake. But he stayed until he had sent the crowds away. Then he went up on a mountain where he could be alone and pray. Later that evening, he was still there. By this time, the boat was a long way from the shore. It was going against the wind and was being tossed around by the waves. A little while before morning, Jesus came walking on the water towards his disciples. When they saw him, they thought he was a ghost. They were terrified and started screaming. At once, Jesus said to them, "Don't worry, I am Jesus. Don't be afraid." Peter replied, "Lord, if it is really you, tell me to come to you on the water." "Come on," Jesus said. Peter then got out of the boat and started walking on the water towards him. But when Peter saw how strong the wind was, he was afraid and started sinking. "Save me, Lord," he shouted. Straight away, Jesus reached out his hand. He helped Peter up and said, "You don't have much faith. Why do you doubt?" When Jesus and Peter got into the boat, the wind died down. The men in the boat worshipped Jesus and said, "You really are the Son of God." Jesus heals sick people in Gennesaret. This is also told in Mark 6:53 to 56. Jesus and his disciples crossed the lake and came to shore near the town of Gennesaret. The people found out that he was there, and they sent word to everyone who lived in that part of the country. So they brought all the sick people to Jesus. They begged him just to let them touch his clothes, and everyone who did was healed. Chapter 15. The teaching of the ancestors. This is also told in Mark 7 1 to 13. About this time, some Pharisees and teachers of the law of Moses came from Jerusalem. They asked Jesus, "Why don't your disciples obey what our ancestors taught us to do? They don't even wash their hands before they eat." Jesus answered, "Why do you disobey God and follow your own teaching? Didn't God command you to respect your father and mother? Didn't He tell you to put to death all who curse their parents? But you let people get by without helping their parents when they should. You let them say that what they have has done has been offered to God. Is this any way to show respect to your parents? You ignore God's commands in order to follow your own teaching, and you are nothing but show-offs. Isaiah the prophet was right when he wrote that God had said, "All of you praise me with your words, but you never really think about me. It is useless for you to worship me when you teach rules made up by humans. What really makes people unclean?" This is also told in Mark 7:14 to 23. Jesus called the crowd together and said, "Pay attention and try to understand what I mean. The food that you put into your mouth doesn't make you unclean and unfit to worship God. The bad words that come out of your mouth are what make you unclean." Then his disciples came over to him and asked, "Do you know that you insulted the Pharisees by what you said?" Jesus answered, "Every plant that my Father in heaven did not plant will be pulled up by the roots. Stay away from those Pharisees. They are like blind people leading other blind people, and all of them will fall into a ditch." Peter replied, "What did you mean when you talked about the things that make people unclean?" Jesus then said, "Don't any of you know what I am talking about by now? Don't you know that the food you put into your mouth goes into your stomach and then out of your body? But the words that come out of your mouth come from your heart, and they are what make you unfit to worship God. Out of your heart come evil thoughts, murder, unfaithfulness in marriage, vulgar deeds, stealing, telling lies, and insulting others. These are what make you unclean. Eating without washing your hands will not make you unfit to worship God." A woman's faith. This is also told in Mark 7:24 to 30. Jesus left and went to the territory near the cities of Tyre and Sidon. Suddenly, a Canaanite woman from there came out shouting, "Lord and Son of David, have pity on me. My daughter is full of demons." Jesus did not say a word, but the woman kept following along and shouting. So his disciples came up and asked him to send her away. Jesus said, "I was sent only to the people of Israel. They are like a flock of lost sheep." The woman came closer, then she knelt down and begged, "Please help me, Lord." Jesus replied, "It isn't right to take food away from children and feed it to dogs." "Lord, that's true," the woman said, "but even dogs get the crumbs that fall from their owner's table." Jesus answered, "Dear woman, you really do have a lot of faith, and you will be given what you want." Oh, at that moment, her daughter was healed. Jesus heals many people. From there, Jesus went along Lake Galilee. Then he climbed a hill and sat down. Large crowds came and brought many people who were crippled or blind or lame or unable to talk. They placed them and many others in front of Jesus, and he healed them all. Everyone was amazed at what they saw and heard. People who had never spoken could now speak. The lame were healed, the crippled could walk, and the blind were able to see. Everyone was praising the God of Israel. Jesus feeds 4,000. This is also told in Mark 8 1 to 10. Jesus called his disciples together and told them, "I feel sorry for these people. They have been with me for 3 days and they don't have anything to eat. I don't want to send them away hungry. They might faint on their way home." His disciples said, "This place is like a desert. Where can he find find enough food to feed such a crowd? Jesus asked them how much food they had. They replied, 7 small loaves of bread and a few little fish. After Jesus had told the people to sit down, he took the 7 loaves of bread and the fish and gave thanks. He then broke them and handed them to his disciples, who passed them around the crowds. Everyone ate all they wanted, and the leftovers filled 7 large baskets. There were 4,000 men who ate, not counting the women and children. After Jesus had sent the crowds away, he got into a boat and sailed across the lake. He came to shore near the town of Magadan. Chapter 16, a demand for a sign from heaven. This is also told in Mark 8:11-13, Luke 12:54-56. The Pharisees and Sadducees came to Jesus and tried to test him by asking for a sign from heaven. He told them, "If the sky is red in the evening, you say the weather will be good. But if the sky is red and gloomy in the morning, you say it is going to rain. You can tell what the weather will be like by looking at the sky, but you don't understand what is happening now. You want a sign because you are evil and won't believe, but the only sign you will be given is what happened to Jonah." Then Jesus left the east of the Pharisees and Sadducees. This is also told in Mark 8:14-21. The disciples had forgotten to bring any bread when they crossed the lake. Jesus then warned them, "Watch out. Guard against the yeast of the Pharisees and Sadducees." The disciples talked this over and said to each other, "He must be saying this because we didn't bring along any bread." Jesus knew what they were thinking and said, "You don't have much faith. Why are you talking about not having any bread? Don't you understand? Have you forgotten about the 5,000 people and all those baskets of leftovers from just 5 loaves of bread? And what about the 4,000 people and all those baskets of leftovers from only 7 loaves of bread? Don't know by now that I am not talking to you about bread? Watch out for the yeast of the Pharisees and Sadducees." Finally, the disciples understood that Jesus wasn't talking about the yeast used to make bread, but all about the teaching of the Pharisees and Sadducees. Who is Jesus? This is also told in Mark 8:27-30, Luke 9:18-21. When Jesus and his disciples were near the town of Caesarea Philippi, he asked them, "What do people say about the Son of Man?" The disciples answered, "Some people say you are John the Baptist, or perhaps Elijah, or Jeremiah, or some other prophet." Then Jesus asked them, "But who do you say I am?" Simon Peter spoke up, "You are the Messiah, the Son of the living God." Jesus told him, "Simon, son of Jonah, you are blessed. You didn't discover this on your own. It was shown to you by my Father in heaven. So I will call you Peter, which means a rock. On this rock I will build my church, and death itself will not have any power over it. I will give you the keys to the kingdom of heaven, and God in heaven will allow whatever you allow on earth, but he will not allow anything that you don't allow." Jesus told his disciples not to tell anyone that he was the Messiah. Jesus speaks about his suffering and death. This is also told in Mark 8:31-9:1, Luke 9:22-27. From then on, Jesus began telling his disciples what would happen to him. He said, "I must go to Jerusalem. There the nation's leaders, the chief priests, and the teachers of the law of Moses will make me suffer terribly. I will be killed, but 3 days later I will rise to life." Peter took Jesus aside and told him to stop talking like that. He said, "God would never let this happen to you, Lord." Jesus turned to Peter and said, "Satan, get away from me. You are in my way because you think like everyone else and not like God." Then Jesus said to his disciples, "If any of you want to be my followers, you must forget about yourself. You must take up your cross and follow me. If you want to save your life, you will destroy it. But if you give up your life for me, you will find it. What will you gain if you own the whole world but destroy yourself? What would you give to get back your soul? The Son of Man will soon come in the glory of his Father and with his angels to reward all people for what they have done. I promise you that some of those standing here will not die before they see the Son of Man coming with his kingdom.